Good afternoon, dear friends, those who are here today and online. Ukraine Crisis Media Center started its working day, and today we are having roundtable, the end of the Merkel epoch. And now we give the floor to our moderator, Oleksandr Shcherba. He is diplomat and the ambassador of Ukraine to Austria until 2021. You are given the floor, please. Good morning, dear ladies and gentlemen. I'm Oleksandr Shcherba. I'm a Ukrainian diplomat. 3 months ago, I came to Ukraine from Austria, and now I work at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And in this discussion, I first would like to say that this is second time in my life I moderate something. That's why something may go wrong, and you should be ready for this, actually. And I would like to introduce our guests first, and then I will speak about discussion. Anka Feldhusen, extraordinary and plenipotentiary ambassador of Germany to Ukraine, a person who knows Germany better than any other German diplomat. And I have met a lot of people in Germany who really care about the situation in Ukraine, but Anka, she is a really great supporter of Ukraine. And for us, this is a great pleasure that Anka is ambassador of Germany in Ukraine. Next is Ivanna Klympush-Tsintsadze, head of committee of the Verkhovna Rada on the issues of European of integration of Ukraine to the European Union. And Ivanka, and I know that you are a driving force that organized this event. We thank you for this, and we are really grateful that you are here today with us. Also, we have Bezsmertny. He is a Ukrainian politician and diplomat. He is a legend in political and diplomatic area, a person we really like to speak to Leonid Shvets, a Ukrainian journalist, and he is not afraid, like other colleagues, to call things by their name, and at the same time, he does this with great talent. Thank you very much for being with us. Also, we have with us political activist and politician Marieluise Beck, great supporter of Ukraine, and Elmar Brok, German politician, former deputy of the European Parliament till 2019. And welcome, and let's start our discussion. For me, this topic is really of interest. In the morning, we speak with Ivanka, and we spoke about the start of Merkel career, political career, and Anka was press secretary in Kiev, in the embassy, and young minister came to us with great hairstyle and with the interesting mimic, and this was Angela Merkel. And some people said that maybe this is the future of CDU, and this was really interesting visit, and this happened in 1996 actually. And then there was election in 1998, and Leonid Shvets came out of power, and then Angela Merkel appeared in high position, and then there was a visa scandal, and Ukraine unexpectedly was in the center of the scandal, and Angela Merkel became the leader of the party in 1998. Then there were difficult years, and Germany rejected nuclear energy and played a big role in the most important aspects of European policy and the Euro-Atlantic integration. And Angela Merkel was the central figure concerning our association agreement and of chancellorship. And this was a political dissolution for Ukraine. Maybe we will speak about it later on. I expect questions, and maybe Anka will have the biggest number of questions. And maybe you should start, and my first question to you, Angela Merkel, and conclusions, whether she is a positive figure for Germany and for Europe, and what will be the future of the continent and the future of the country.
Words. Decided to speak English after all, so that our guests on Zoom can also understand me directly. And it is, after all, still a little bit easier to speak English than Ukrainian. Thank you for inviting me. It is a little bit difficult also for me as a civil servant to comment on a political figure like Angela Merkel. I think my colleagues who are listening in there, Marieluise Beck, Elmar Brok, have known Angela Merkel for much longer time than me. They will certainly say a lot more about her than I can do. What I can say is, yes, indeed, I remember her trip to Ukraine as environment minister in '96. When she went to Chernobyl. But what I remember most, of course, and I think what is most important for Ukraine, is when she decided in 2014 to try and help Ukraine when Russia attacked it in summer 2014 after the annexation of Crimea in March. It was her decision to get involved together with France. She went to Minsk. She had a memorable time, memorable in a, I mean, not in a positive sense, I would say, but memorable time in Minsk, and again in February 2015. She was there pretty much alone, I think, with one of her advisors. The other advisors were here in Kiev, and especially in February 2015, they were drafting the Minsk agreements in my office, so it was a very close thing for me to see what was happening. What I did see was her extreme engagement to fight Ukraine's cause vis-à-vis Russia. And ever since, she has continued to be interested on a daily basis in what was going on in Ukraine. I left Ukraine in summer 2015. We still wrote daily reports, and whenever we wanted to stop them, because it was a lot of work for the embassy, we got a sign from the Chancellery, nope, she reads them every day. Yeah, so we kept writing daily reports, and we're still writing weekly reports, even in 2021, because she is really interested in it. Whenever we tried to stop that, there was also signs, no, she wants to read it. So with Angela Merkel, Ukraine loses a person who is extremely interested in the country on a very personal basis, because she has been in the thick of things in 2014 and 2015. Nevertheless, and perhaps with that we can then forward this discussion to other people, the German policy, especially German foreign policy, never changes abruptly with an election. We have a consensus, a kind of consensus, a political consensus in Germany, especially on foreign policy here. And I do not expect this new government, whatever it will look like, and we're just at the first stages of forming a new coalition, there won't be a big change. The big change will be, at the head of this government will be a person who has not been personally involved in everything that concerns Ukraine. So this is something that we all have to work on to make this new government understand where Ukraine stands, what it wants also from Germany. I am working on that with my team every day, and I hope we will very soon know who the people will be whom we have to work with in Germany. Thank you.
Thank you, Anka. Я хотів би підтвердити Thank you very much, Anka. I would like now to confirm your statement about the personal attitude and personal involvement of Lady Chancellor to the affairs in Ukraine. Back in that period, which you mentioned, I worked in the I worked in the diplomatic corps, and there were nobody in Ukraine who would agree to translate the telephone talk between the then President Yanukovych and Chancellor Merkel, and I was the only one who agreed to do that. And that talk lasted for 40 minutes. At that very moment, the only issue that was discussed by the Chancellor with the Chancellor involvement was liberation of Yulia Tymoshenko, and almost 40 minutes she spent to persuade Yanukovych that he should liberate Ms. Tymoshenko, and that showed me clearly how personally she was attached to the affairs in Ukraine. And I will perhaps abuse my role of the moderator and suggest that we speak now one by one, and the mic now goes to Ivanna. Klympush-Tsintsadze, and my first question to you is about geopolitics. For the latest 20 years, this has been perhaps one of the mostly heard term in many public discourse and in much public discourse, and what is your opinion? Who is capable to take fully Ms. Merkel's role, fully take it over, and what will this mean for Ukraine? I will try to answer your question one by one. I'm very grateful to the Euro-Atlantic Course civil society organization, and I hope that will be just first out of series of discussion devoted to the new international course of Ukraine, and possible changes and inevitable changes which this will mean for Ukraine. We may expect that the role of Germany and the course of Germany will change somehow, and in the EU, and this will pose a special task for Ukraine to explain itself to the new German government. You mentioned that you had been writing and you have been writing everyday reports to the Chancellor, and that you hope and believe that the Chancellor has been reading them regularly. I don't think that we can expect that man, most probably man, who would substitute Ms. Merkel, will be reading them every day. Now, approaching to the end of the Merkel's times, I always feel that I should correct my colleagues that stepping back from the position of a chancellor, Ms. Merkel nevertheless can stay the active member of her own party, can become the member of the European Parliament on behalf of that party, and or find for herself any other areas of politics where to serve the society. This suggests that it's a bit early to keep saying that the times of Merkel are over. The second part of the question, irrespectively who will be the new German chancellor and irrespectively of the shape of the coalition, the European politics would remain rather complex. I believe that there's a partial vacuum of power or stance, or partially the change in the politics would stimulate Mr. Macron as French president to step in and to take a more proactive role in the European Union, which is backed with the rise in gas prices, energy crisis in Europe, etc. From the Napoleon times, we clearly know that France is able to offer some pan-European project to Europe. And later on, it was several times imposing vetoes on the extension of the European Union. We clearly recollect this from the latest extension in early 2000, when the Central European countries were joining Europe, and quite recently, the most recent case, when the Western Balkan countries were hampered by France to join the European Union as soon as possible. I believe that this stance of France hampers a bit the rapid development of the French course in Europe. Nevertheless, all that factors inevitably would influence the future of relations between France, Germany, and Ukraine. We do not expect that there would be a sharp change and I do not expect that this would not create any stimulus for Ukraine to continue its internal reforms for the sake of the international aspirations, and I do not expect that the new German chancellor would strive to become a strong leader in the Normandy format, and I expect that Germany would look at Ukraine through a traditional prism of its interests in relation to Russia. In this aspect, I trust most Mr. Brzezinski, who kept saying that German traditional was interested with the cooperation with Russia, Russian Federation, and looked at it through the glasses of its of its feelings after the Second World War and through the considerations of security. That's why I don't expect sharp change. On behalf of Germany, I would like to add a couple of words here to contribute to discussion, because I do not fully agree with you. We all keep in mind that positive role that Germany played in Europe in two aspects. The first is its strong incentive to do something, and the second was the readiness to do that. And of course, the feeling of being guilty, of course, is somewhere at the background, but at the same time, Germany remains rather proactive and ambitious, and this will stimulate Germany's leadership in the EU. Yeah, I agree with you fully, and I would like to add that the economic might of Germany, it imposes additional responsibilities on Germany, while the economics of France, it sets it slightly back. Mr. Brok and Ms. Beck know Ms. Merkel quite well. Ms. Beck, thank you for joining us today. Can you hear me?
Let me address a question to you. What's your feeling? Is it going to be Ampel coalition, or will it be something else, and what it means for Ukraine, all these configurations, Kenya, Jamaica, whatever. What is your feeling?
Well, I think that debate is over with. Certain possibilities were excluded. Whoops, now I have no contact anymore. Do you still hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Certain possibilities and combinations were excluded by the voters. And taking what we have now, a Christian Democratic Party, which is really in a very, very difficult situation, or pretty chaotic, and not having a strong stand and really needing time to reshuffle within the opposition, and the left, which might have been a partner, at least a possible partner for the Social Democrats and for parts of the Green Party also, they did not get strong enough. So I think I can assure you that we will have this so-called signal light, which means red, yellow, green, Social Democrats, liberals, and the Green Party. I'm very sure about that. Now, for you, the important question will be, what does it mean for Ukraine? And I think here we have to go back one step into Merkel's politics. She was wonderfully engaged in Ukraine. I think it also has something to do with her personal history. She had to grow up in an authoritarian state, and she knew something about freedom. So I think that was one of the reasons why she really personally was so engaged. Also, and this is something which we have to think about, she always knew how far one could go in conflict with Russia. She contradicted Putin personally. She fought with him, like the 40 minutes telephone call about Yulia Tymoshenko. She had many of those telephone calls with Putin. And he knew that she knew. I think we will not have any leader now in this new government who has this personal standing and knowledge down to psychology, and both of them knowing what they mean and trying to find the line, the red line for both of them. This is one of the reasons why in 2008 Angela Merkel contradicted the Americans in Bucharest, who wanted to offer the map possibility to Georgia and Ukraine, which I think would have been good to do, where she says if we would have done that, the conflict would have started even earlier. And so this is what explains her moves. So she really was at Ukraine's side, I think, and she had not expected that. She went over this red line for Putin when she brought Navalny to Germany and made him survive, which was not Putin's plan. And then there is another question of red lines, which is Nord Stream 2. Because I think amongst us, we don't have to discuss this. Nord Stream 2 is a geostrategic project. It is making Ukraine more vulnerable, and it was Angela Merkel who in 2015 signed it. That was after the annexation of Crimea and after the war in the Donbass had started. She never has publicly revealed what was her reasons to sign. Maybe in some years we will be able to talk about it openly, and she will talk about it openly. But I have this hint it had something to do with dealing with red lines with Russia. And this, I think, might change a little bit with the new government. There's a lot of people within the Social Democratic Party who think that they can somehow go back to Willy Brandt's politics, which is negotiating with Kremlin and telling that nobody wants to push them against the wall. I would say underestimating how cynical Kremlin is, and that it is not an ideological communist system like we had when Willy Brandt was in power, but that you have an authoritarian kleptocracy like the European Parliament said in its resolutions. So there will be, that will make changes, might make changes for Ukraine, because you know you are in between. The Liberals and the Green Party have been much more outspoken on the authoritarian system in Russia and on being pro-Ukrainian, but in the end, the question will be, how can they deliver? And there you at least have a contradiction within the Green Party, who have big problems with questions of security in the sense of military. You all probably realized when one of the speakers of the parties accompanied your president to the front and came back to Germany. I think they do need support in non-lethal weapons. And there was a big outcry within the Green Party, within big parts of the German society, including liberals. And this is going to be, I think, one of the difficult points, together with a development in Ukraine which disturbs us as the friends of Ukraine. And if the development within Ukraine will become more and more problematic, then the forces which within Europe, Germany, France, say, well, you guys, you better not concentrate so much on Ukraine. It's not decided yet that they really want to go west. This will come into balance. So I think to a certain extent, it's our duty to keep on working for the interests of the Ukrainian society and country. And it is the duty of the people within Ukraine to keep track.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for being so straightforward with us, especially in your capacity as the former member of the Green Party, because we attach quite a lot of hopes to the Greens entering the new coalition, and it's important to remain sober on that issue. Mr. Brok, you are from a different wing of German politics, from CDU. What is your feeling about what's coming upon Germany and upon Europe in general, especially in the light of, rather apocalyptic feelings with this skyrocketing prices on natural gas? Will this new coalition be strong on Russia and strong on Europe? We can't hear you. No. Could you turn on the mic?
What is that?
Yeah.
No, no, it works. I use this American machine, and these are never reliable. That should have been a joke. Thank you very much. Let me make two remarks. First of all, a different angle of European policy. When I heard Marieluise Beck, and we did a lot of work which had to do with Ukraine, but also with other Greens. I think in the question, Eastern policy of Ukraine, the Christian Democrats and the Greens are not so far away from each other. And therefore, it's easy for me to take most of the narrative Marieluise has given here to that discussion, and I have not to repeat that. Secondly, I know Angela Merkel since spring 1990, so from the quite very beginning, and we have cooperated since then. And there are 2 points that was shown again on her visit the weekend in Israel, that she sticks to the principle and to the values. And therefore, it's very much clear for her. And Marieluise has talked about her origin in East Germany, that she will stand always on the side of countries who want to get their freedom. And therefore, she is on the side of Ukraine. She's emotionally also on the side of Ukraine. But what she always wanted to do is to find a balance to keep peace. Sometimes perhaps she has tried too much balance, but she tried to have the balance, and that is the policy Russia, Ukraine, but I know from herself that it's very clear on which side she really stands, whom she trusts and whom she does not trust. When I hear her private remarks about the president in Moscow. And so I was always quite confident in this question. What we have to see is, when it comes to the new policy, that first of all, we have in Germany a luxury problem. All four parties competing for government now, and you said my party probably will not part of it, but all the three parties, the Greens, the Liberals, the Social Democrats, and the Christian Democrats, are pro-European countries. In Germany, in the election, the pro-Russia parties, the right-wing and the left-wing party, got less than 15% together. The communists even under 5%. So we have 85%, 80% of the votes going to pro-European parties, and which means that there will be not a general difference to the policy we have before. And there will be a lot of stability. And every German chancellor will follow in this line. There might be some personal differentiations and what someone likes more or less, but there will be no principal change. In German policy, it doesn't matter what or which of these two possible coalitions will arise at the end of the day for Christmas. And I must say that there might be a difference in that question that we have, especially in the Social Democratic Party, so it's mentioned Willy Brandt here, a tradition which believes that also because of the German criminal deeds in the Second World War, we have something to do, good things to Soviet Union. But many have forgotten that the Soviet Union does not exist anymore. So they believe that Russia is like Soviet Union. And here I think we have to clarify a little bit that also the Ukraine is victim of Nazi deeds. As I read over this weekend the articles about the opening of Babi Jar, and also what the Holodomor meant in Ukraine, that there should be an understanding that the Ukraine were both victims of Hitler and Stalin, that this Ukraine needs a special protection, a special support in that case. This has to make clearer what the Hitler-Stalin pact did to that part of the world, Eastern Poland, the Baltic states, Ukraine, especially West Ukraine, Moldova, and other places. What is still the lines of today? Then we have to see that we carry a lot of responsibility, that Ukraine, which is free in its decision, can go forward. But I think what Mrs. Merkel always said, and we have said in only one sentence, we have to remind Ukraine for her readiness to reform. The Europe-Atlantic process depends a lot on the internal reform of Ukraine, which has made a lot of progress, but it has to be considered. I was, a few weeks ago, on the conference Yes for Europe in Kiev. I had the impression that we have a discussion now in Kiev, but it was only the organizer of that conference, but I do not know, that everyone relies on that what the Americans would for Ukraine. That might be true too. But that the European Union and its member states have given nearly 20 times more for Ukraine than the United States did in money and support. That the free trade agreement and the visa liberalization were incredible steps forward in favor of Ukraine, which nobody else has done. Then we have to consider whether a stable relationship might be for the further development of Ukraine, where we have to find ideas how, for example, in a development for the Ukraine by opening more and more the internal market of the Ukraine, of the European Union for the Ukraine, work perhaps one day to European Economic Area, the Norwegian solution, as a step in between before there will be a full membership in the European Union, which I do not see for the moment, more from the European point of view, because we are not yet stable enough for further integration, and here we have to reform ourselves. But I think that is such a positive perspective we have to see. What would happen in 2008, or has happened in 2008, not to bring it into NATO. This was a decision partly coming out of certain understandings from the 90s, but also that was still the hope, despite Putin's speech in Munich, I think 2006, 2007, that there might be a solution with Russia in Europe. There was the possibility still in 2008 that Mobilin, as your ambassador was to Ukraine, said would be no problem for Russia that the European Union would become, that Ukraine would become member of the European Union. That was a thought, bring them to the European Union, but then it's not NATO, not necessary, and we can do such a deal together with Russia, which make the most progress for Ukraine, which was, looking back now, a little bit naive. A little bit naive because Putin himself had changed over the years in an incredible negative way. And but I believe that we should continue such a policy, and that we should make clear that Ukraine itself is a red line. It's in the German interest, and I think everyone has to understand it, that the independence of Ukraine is also in European interest. A free, democratic, independent, sovereign Ukraine is in the best interest and also the security interest of us. That is perhaps the best assurance that the future European and German policy will support Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brok. On the point of Soviet Union being already dead, let me share with you the statistics that were published here in Ukraine yesterday. 49% of Russians want to live in a USSR-like state. 49%. And of course, also comes to mind the result of the survey who Russians see as the greatest man who ever lived a couple of years ago. The absolutely clear number one was Joseph Stalin. Number two was Vladimir Putin. Number three was Alexander Pushkin, okay. But the first number one and number two were shocking. So this Russia that so many politicians, not yourself, but many in Europe, say we need Russia as a partner, is probably not a kind of country that wants Europe as a partner. And
excuse me, can you repeat the beginning of that survey? I didn't understand it.
Yeah, 49% of Russians, according to the latest Levada sociological, 49% of Russians want to live in a USSR-like state.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
How do you make a survey in a country where nobody is allowed to speak out openly anymore?
Yeah, well,
Rada knows that themselves.
I imagine, okay. I imagine the reality might be even darker. Thank you. We now pass on back to the Ukrainian participants of our discussion. Пане Романе, ви такий мислитель український.
I don't want to ask some superficial questions because I know that you have really in-depth answers. So please bring them to us at once, please. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Thank you for this invitation. We thank the authors, the initiators of today's discussion, and I am convinced that Ukrainians need many events like this at different levels in order to understand the epoch of Angela Merkel and, moreover, to understand the lessons. These lessons should be provided further in order to think through relationship with the European Union, with Europe on the whole, to search for our place, not only in the European, but in the global politics. And now we have an important time. I believe this is really important time we have. And this time, I believe, is used very good by Kremlin. And in 2008, there was aggression against Georgia, 2014 aggression against Ukraine, and 2021 aggression against Europe. And this should be read like this. And the Kremlin constantly attack when changes appear. And Germany, as a center of the European politics and European policy, they are under key strike of the Kremlin. And I believe that Berlin and Brussels do not understand this topic. Unfortunately, in Kiev, they also have superficial attitude to this, and we have ongoing war here. And of course, Angela Merkel is a great patriot of Germany, and she developed Europe in a great way. She contributed a lot in order that Germany be able to have good move ahead, and she really thought through all these aspects of moving ahead. And Helmut Kohl, who is not very popular now in Germany, and I came to politics when Helmut Kohl was in power in Germany, and I am a proponent of SDU, and in the history of Germany, I believe there was a shock, and I cannot even deal with it without emotions now. And this is the issue of big coalition, and we now face the consequences of this big coalition. We need to understand this issue more in depth. We should look at the face of Ms. Merkel and Mr. Steinmeier when someone speaks about formula of Steinmeier. And whenever you look, you will see the consequences of this big coalition. In 2006, Ukraine, only once in its political history, was trying to form a coalition government. And for the first time, then we have seen the text of so-called the big coalition. And this was great disillusion and illusion at the same time. And we understood that this is really remote from the ideology of this union of CDU and SPD. And we understood that there will be a lot of problems ahead, because we have seen this relationship that were built by Kuchma-Kohl, Kuchma-Schröder, then Yushchenko-Merkel, then Yanukovych-Merkel, then Poroshenko-Merkel. And in this relationship between them, this was not only German approach and Ukrainian institutional incapability. In this relationship, they had also personal things. But no matter what these personal things, I may bring example of relations between Merkel and Yushchenko. Unfortunately, they were not really good. And we may bring Poroshenko and Merkel relationship. They faced difficult circumstances. There were many problems, but somehow they were able to build their relationship. I would like to say one important thing. We should understand it properly. History and now and the future concerning the relationship between Kiev and Berlin, we believe that more depends on Kiev than on Berlin in this relationship. And we believe that we need to make our relationship more technical. And we should understand that the Berlin is Clausewitz and Kiev, we are like frying pan, and these are incompatible things, but we need to somehow unite them. And I asked my colleagues that we should get united around one table, because in Bucharest in 2008 we faced the situation and no one knows what really happened then during that meeting. Everything that is said now, I believe, does not reflect the real situation. And I would like that we would have this technical meeting with Berlin to have this answer about 2010, about the concept of Gerusia, and one Berlin didn't respond on this. And this happened after the war in Georgia, and this was a discourse during and it needs answers, whether we like it or not. Whether Berlin and Kiev wants this, we tragically are guided by Kremlin, and we implement this concept. We should understand how this big Germany, and together with Ukraine that is on the way of progress, why do we participate in this discourse that was driven by Kremlin? Whether in political sphere or other spheres, you will see the fragments of this concept. And now we face one more problem that torpedoes even positive breakthroughs. This is about the placement of the center to the Pacific Ocean region. And I believe that the main role should be played by Europe, not by other regions of the world. And McKitter's Wofer, Spikeman, we may read them, or Cutler, Demandis that we have now, we will see a constant contest between two types of civilization. And I believe that today's Europe needs Ukrainian understanding and vision of the situation. I would like to remind the stage that the aspect we should understand. In conflict situations in the territory we live in, Ukrainians and people who lived before us here on this territory, we were influenced greatly by Germans, and we should understand it and find the answers to this type of relationship. And I spoke with our German colleagues and in the trilateral group, and I often hear about negotiations in Brest in 1918, and I have seen the parallel developments that were related to remote times, and we repeat ourselves. We are high intellectual people and high intellectual countries, but we cannot reject this discourse that constantly is brought up by the Kremlin in our bilateral relations. We should get together, and if we're speaking about economic issues, we should calculate all this. If we are speaking about politics, we should find answers to this question. As of now, Germany and Europe, they face difficult exams, tests, and Ukraine passed the test, this test that was provided by the Kremlin, and Ukraine was tested repeatedly throughout its history. And could Europe and Germany pass this test? I mean, first of all, Nord Stream, and this we may help, Ukraine may help, and to show what is going on in reality. And once again, I would like to repeat, you cannot even imagine what we did in 2015, 2016. It was so difficult to explain what happened in the Kremlin and what is happening in Donbass. Until now, at the level of establishment, in its maturity, Europe has resonance with Ukraine, but at a lower level, there is no proper understanding, and it means that there are many political fluctuations that may bring not only to formation of the left governments, starting from Germany and going to south, and right radical, starting from Germany to the south. And it means that Europe will face a lot of difficulties, and geopolitical changes will happen not because there is reinforcement of China or Russia, but because there are maneuvers like this. The reason of them is that Kremlin provides their own discourse through Russia today, through the pipe, no matter how. This says that the Kremlin manipulates using all unfair instruments that are not appropriate for the century. And I believe that we should have technological relations, especially between Kiev and Berlin, because this is a key to European stability, to prospects of European stability. Moreover, we should restore the role that the European Union played together with Great Britain in world policy. Thank you. Roman, I would like to argue with you because I was the ambassador in a country that is rather difficult for Ukraine, and I've been working there for 6 years, and the task of Putin is rather simple. He fills the gaps that appear in the souls of people in Europe, in the discourse. And Europe believes less, maybe not believes, but Europe with less enthusiasm treats European idea, the idea of the European Union. There is great Euroscepticism that on the rise, and we have the gaps that are filled with everything, with Putin, yellow vests, radical Islamism. So Putin, he really interferes, but this crisis is not made by Russia. This is a bigger crisis, and Europe didn't find a way out of this crisis. And Mr. Brok said that he has the optimism that all political parties who may form the coalition, now they are all pro-European, so there is hope. But the main threat to Europe is not in the rise of anti-European forces, but in the change, maybe in less enthusiasm. They have less trust in themselves. That's why Europe looks less principled and less convincing than Putin. But this is a difficult topic, and this is an unpleasant topic. Maybe we should not focus on this topic too much. And now we would like to give the floor to Leonid, and we are going to ask a popular question in Ukraine: why we are still not in NATO? Okay, I won't say this like this. I would like to ask about changes in Germany and what they mean for European and Euro-Atlantic integration for Ukraine. What can you tell about this? Thank you for inviting me here, because I feel myself as a journalist. I'm not a politician. I feel myself as a journalist, first of all. And I understand that diplomats, they do everything on purpose. So if I was invited and I do not have any diplomatic ranks, I do not have any political burdens, let's say so, and I may speak openly because I have 10 years of experience in freelance. Maybe I'm the most independent journalist in this country. So what I would like to say in the context of what I've heard and what I wanted to say when I came here. For me, and here I may express the view of common Ukrainian. I'm not speaking from the expert side. What we see now, what we hear, these are difficult but interesting stories. The story of the West that changes right before our eyes. And there are some disturbing changes like Brexit, like Trump presidency. It was even somehow threatening, maybe. Now we see the new round. I do not agree with experts, with diplomats who say that there won't be changes in German politics concerning policy of Germany concerning Ukraine. We will have these changes because Europe and the West change. And Ms. Merkel, she is a prominent figure. 16 years in conditions like this, she led the most powerful country of Europe at the times when Europe was rather disturbed, and they tried to find the way to understand what Europe means now. At the same time, Germany tried to find answers what Germany is. And they had processes of unification, and Merkel's speech at the Union event, the anniversary of unification of Germany, she provided her understanding that in her own country, some people didn't relate to her as a European, a German, and she was from the eastern part of Germany, and these were vulnerable things for her. And
this allows us to understand her better because we also are still becoming Ukraine, becoming Ukrainians. We are passing through our stories in parallel, and we try to understand the West, to understand the West and its relations with China, how Europe would change, how the United States would change, and what will be the role of Ukraine, because we find ourselves in the midst of the war, and we have to respond the war imposed upon Ukraine by Russia, and while Russia always stand for money, and how we can rely on the West in this respect. During the latest years, latest period, we have witnessed a huge change in the Belarus regime. They had become more radical, and now we see that Belarus had become the testing ground for Russia. They test technologies, I mean social technologies. They test military technologies from Russia. And the big question for us, whether our politics and our policy course should remain the same as it was some years ago or not. And of course, we have to think over all these things. As for the possible changes in the European policy, in German policy, and in politics in Germany, I try to imagine how Eastern European politics should change now. In my opinion, all the political career of Chancellor Merkel was aimed at strengthening Europe. And when Russia had become the authoritarian country, and now the Europe as a whole, the European structures are facing this authoritarian state, and they cannot respond to Russia as separate or individual Berlin, individual Paris, individual Rome. They have to respond collectively. I believe that Putin is playing very strongly and proactively, and perhaps we are relying and dreaming about joint democratic opposition, joint democratic front line against Russia. And our war or conflict which we have here in Ukraine just shows for us that the Western position is rather weak at the moment, and we should consider our Western partners very carefully. And recently we witnessed that the most reliable partners in implementation of the biggest values are our Western politicians and diplomats who work closely with Ukraine. Actually, this was my my attempt to blame Ukrainian politicians And quite often we are very much concerned what collective Europe would say. And I mentioned the survey in Russia, and 32% of Russians are willing to live in a country which causes fears from other countries, which is perceived as a very strong, aggressive country by other countries. Of course, this is a sharp decrease from more than 40%, which was demonstrated during previous surveys, but nevertheless, 32%, it's a big portion of population. Okay, now it seems to me that we should start our Q&A session. I recollect back in 2010, the former German ambassador invited me to a dinner at he asked traditional question, what Ukraine and Germany would be in 10 years. 10 years is a very long period. Let us cut down this period up to 5 years. How Ukraine and Germany would like in 5, or better to say 4 years. What would happen to them in 4 years? Is anybody ready to answer this question? While you are thinking, let us encourage people to ask questions from broad public. Anka.
Always thought that Ukraine is a European country, and that it needs to continue steadfastly on its way towards the European Union. But of course, it means what several of you have said. It also means that the European Union knows where it stands, and I think this is a big problem right now. And I do hope that the next 4 years will show us that the European Union will consolidate its position and remember its values and act and live accordingly. And I think, honestly, one of the signals where we're going will be our reaction towards what's happening in Poland with the judicial system in Poland. I do hope that the European Union will remember why it got together, and that it needs to be strong in its values. So I'm an optimist. So I do hope that in 4 years, Ukraine and the EU will have come closer. And there are a few things I think where this will be the case, like the electricity grid, very concretely. But since this is probably my last chance to speak, let me just say one thing on responsibility. I'm always sad when I, for instance, hear your ambassador in Berlin say that Germany hasn't assumed responsibility because of its, actually, yes, guilt because of what we did in this region during World War II. I think we have assumed responsibility, but we must be very, very bad at communicating it. We have, and you know that, Oleksandr, we have thousands of links between civil society in Germany and in Ukraine, be it schools, be it associations, be it even veteran associations. I am invited every day to about 10 of these events, but we do not seem to be able to communicate this concretely. And I am so happy that the federal president went to Koryokivka last week on Wednesday, because he is a person who was actively looking since 2017 for unknown places. And since I, by chance, found Koryokivka, and he accepted to go there, I do think that the fact that this was widely written about in German press, Ukraine has been a little bit more known now to Germany. Yeah, because I agree, and this is something that you have to know. Even when it was still the Soviet Union, Germans never said Soviets; they always said the Russians. And I've heard it from a German politician not a long time ago. It's the Russians. It has nothing to do with Ukraine existing. It is a decades-old word that we used even for the Soviet Union. We all need to work together to get this out of the hands. But I think that all these society links, they are working for that. The embassies are working for that. Press is working for that. We're on a good path, but it takes a long time, unfortunately. More than 4 years, I'm afraid.
You know that this feeling of some disappointment has very concrete reasons in Ukraine. It's first of all because the hopes were really high, and it's never good when the hopes are too high. And in light of what happened with Nord Stream 2, in light of recent interview with Ambassador Heusgen that I read in Spiegel, where he says openly that it was Angela Merkel who stopped the whole idea of MAP for Ukraine in Bucharest. In light of these things, there is a little bit a sense of disappointment, but I do hope that it won't overshadow the huge, enormous positive role that Germany in general and this chancellor in particular played for Ukraine in these 16 years. Іванка, я бачу, що ти дуже ретельно записувала. Що ти
Ivanna, I've been observing that you had been writing down your ideas about current discussion. Perhaps you are ready to contribute. Yes, I am ready to agree and disagree on some points. As for the Roman statement about the need to make our relations more technical, I mean relations between Germany and Ukraine, I tried to imagine for myself the more technological communication from the Kiev side. I was trying to do this to understand how our future may like in 4 years. Also, I disagree with Leonid that Western diplomats could be seen as the biggest supporters of democratic values. I slightly disagree with that. Everything that was being done between 2014 and 2019 reminded me a sandwich. There was a sandwich consistent of politicians who were aimed at reforms, civil society, and foreign diplomats who were ready to support our reforms. As of today, I do not feel sufficient expression of a position on behalf of our Western partners. I do not mean that that which is meant by Medvedev in his latest article. I see it as purely expression of his attempt to manipulate with us, but I mean that our strategic statement about our aspirations requires for us to have an open, clear, and true dialogue with our Western partners, sometimes we feel that we are not taken as seriously as we would expect to be taken, and we would appreciate very much as if we see more openness and truth. We will clearly observe what would happen with the gas prices, with the whole situation around the Nord Stream, the response to the Budapest contract with Gazprom, the European response on the sideways gas sideways around Ukraine. Actually, this again brings us back to the German certification of the Nord Stream 2. If at this very moment Europe will find a trade-off with the Russian Federation because they are afraid of cold winter, they are afraid of cold temperatures in European households, etc. This will be one situation, and if Europe decides that they would show solidarity, etc., then this would be quite different situation. Europe remains the economic giant, of course, but politically they tend to demonstrate concerns or express that they are disturbed, but very seldom Europe demonstrates clear political position as to something. And now this is the moment when we will see whether Europe will strengthen its political stance or it would remain only the political structure with strong economic but weak political positions. This brings in the military aspects of their cooperation with the United States, and this brings in also the situation with the ISOS Union and etc. So we will witness how Europe would grow out from its weak and limited military military position, and how it would become able to protect the values upon which Europe was founded. I thought that in 2014-2015 we had moral morally strong position. At that moment, we felt that we defended European democratic values, and while today we had dissoluted our moral strength in this aspect in Ukraine, partially because we are slowly promoting reforms, partially because we are losing the pace, partially because we do not strongly promote all these values in Ukrainian society. And now we have to find new coincidence in national interests of Ukraine and other European countries. Today we witness that European elites are changing. They have no personal and emotional connection with Ukraine, and we have to find our own paths. Much would depend on the Kiev politics, what readiness it would show to cooperate with Berlin, because Berlin has a lot of challenges and Ukraine is not #1 priority in all that challenges, of course. Thank you, Ivanna. I would add about the change of elites. In 2014, 2015 in Europe, the leaders were in power to whom the occupation of Crimea and war in Donbass meant personal offense. And today we witness the coming of power of those representatives of elites who believe that that was simply mistakes. And I keep reminding to my political interlocutors in Germany, look at the first phrase of your national anthem. This is unity, law, and freedom, and this is what unites us.
It's a general question to you. Your feeling about the coming 4 or 5 years of Ukrainian-German relations, plus, as I see, you raised your hand, so you have to add something on your own. Thank you.
And I have to leave now.
Okay, then the same question to you, Mr. Brok.
Look, there might be an emotional situation, but the Europeans were still clear until now, and that was also the German policy. There's no reason for larmoyance. It was not just to say this was not just a question of that time. Germany and the European Union were clear in the sanctions towards Russia until now. Germany was one of the greatest victims of the sanctions. And when I look to my region here, which I represented, many companies lost their exports to Russia. And despite that, because of political reasons, we have kept it until now. And that should be seen. The United States increased trade with Russia. We decreased. It has to be seen. And sometimes it would be helpful to have a fair judgment for that in order to encourage European politicians to continue with that. And that is, I think, also quite important. I mentioned the deep free trade agreement, the visa liberalization, all that. Who else has done that? Please, let's continue and build on that. Combined with the reform process in Ukraine, it will become a success story. And we have to see also that the gas problem at the moment might be helpful if we deal with that in our right way. What I have seen now is that Gazprom owns already nearly 40% of the gas reserves in Germany, the holds for that in northern Germany. But they have not filled it up since spring. They are empty. And this is a political strategy. We have to make aware now that here's a political strategy, and the high prices, which is not only Russia, it's the world market, but that behavior together will show, hopefully, that the total reliance the economic people talk about of Russian exports in that question might not work. And we know that the Russians are afraid that because of the green transformation in Europe, after some time, gas is not so needed anymore. I know a question Putin has done to the Chancellor in this summer. How long do you still need the gas? It's a new dimension in that, which we have to discuss and have to use properly for European development and also European, German, and Ukrainian relationship. So I'm quite hopeful in that question if we do it in the right way. And therefore, I must say, Marieluise, that the Green membership in the next German government will not be negative for Ukraine, the other way around. And I'm very hopeful that there will come certain clarifications.
Mr. Beck, thank you so much. Mr. Brok, thank you so much for participating.
Bye-bye.
Sorry about that. I want to agree with you that we in Ukraine must be more appreciative about the steadfastness of many European politicians who, despite enormous pressure applied to them by European businesses, are holding on to the sanction, to the policy of the sanctions. That's true. And also what you implied and what is really true, in today's situation, we Ukrainians do have gas, natural gas. Many European countries don't. And so we must understand the enormous, maybe even unprecedented predicament in which many European politicians will be in this summer and judge their actions from that perspective. Mr. Brok, thank you once again. Ms. Beck, again, the same question to you. We seek desperately a source of optimism in this discussion, and Greens were always optimistic about things, especially about Europe. Please give that to us.
Thank you.
Okay, Elmar, you want to enter the Green Party? Sounded pretty good.
You have a lot of other disadvantages. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. You know that I changed from Parliament into a little institute which called itself Center for Liberal Modernity. And we started that initiative because what you could see that liberal democracies are under pressure worldwide. And this is the situation we are in. Russia is part of it. They have been working actively in undermining liberal democracy. Maybe this 1 or 2% of Brexit, which could have turned it to the other side, was due to Russian support in that campaign, which we know about. But we see the development of countries within the EU, like Poland, very difficult to decide how strict should EU be, but not kick them out, because this would again follow the plan which obviously within Kremlin is being developed, which is really weakening liberal democracies, strengthening populists, and thus thus bringing us in a situation of isolation. Unfortunately, and the world really has changed a lot during the last years, which some of us could not have imagined. The United States are not the one and strong power anymore, which stands for a democracy where we think never anything can happen to it. Trump showed us that also even the United States are vulnerable. And this is not over with. And you've seen it with Biden. Because Biden and the United States were not going along with German Nord Stream 2 plans. But in the end, Biden let it pass because he thought it's more important that the transatlantic link between the United States and Germany is kept on the path. Then we cut that also because that again is one of the ideas of Kremlin and within our left and right extreme parties, which we have within our countries. Take France. France and Macron is under pressure from a right-wing party which is openly cooperating and being financed by Kremlin. So this is the surrounding, and in the midst of it, a country like Ukraine, actually nation building at the end of the 20th century, at the beginning of the 21st century. And this nation building is not always on a course which never has setbacks. And at the moment, I'm very disturbed because I'm afraid that there might be setbacks which are being taken in parliament and in the presidential administration, which really upset me. But look at this weekend. Sebastian Kurz, a populist, had to step down. The Czechs voted down their populist president. There are huge demonstrations in Poland, pro-European, because the population understands we don't want to leave Europe. The German election, yes, there might be parts in it which want to still dream about friendship with Russia and a policy of détente, but they are a strong pro-European center government. And so this is not really a bad basis which we have. We almost have not been talking about a challenge which we all are facing, and I hope which will bring us together, which is the development, I do not say catastrophe, the development of climate. You already have the consequences within your country, especially within a country which has to rely on agricultural production. Climate change for you will be and is already, you feel it. So this is something which climate does not ask about borders anymore. So we have to act together if we understand that that is a challenge which we cannot run away from. We will handle it much better being democratic countries with chances of small activities, energy within the people, not having this heavy, big tanker, which the Russian economy is, and which already shows that this economy will not be able to handle the challenges which we have. So I think there will be setbacks, but if we understand where the chances lie for our future, there is no alternative to walking together. And one last, maybe positive idea, which is not from my side. I cite Karl Schlögl, who is a long-standing historian on Eastern Europe. He says the best way to make the connections between us stronger is, and I know it's not politically correct, is Wizz Air, Ryanair, and all the other airlines. And I think he's true. If you can go to Odessa for a small fee, or to Lemberg, or to Kharkiv, to Kiev, and you experience that those are modern European countries, and that it is not about borscht anymore when you go into those restaurants. You get this feeling, yes, this is Europe. And I think this is helping much more. For example, us coming from Berlin and learning that the Ukrainian kitchen in many, many, many restaurants is much better than ours in Berlin. You feel the modern country, and you feel that this is Europe. So, yes, I hope that someday flying will not harm climate anymore, that we can work on that also. But really, people meeting each other. This is what we need after Europe has been divided and we have been cut off of each other. We did not know about Ukraine. For us, it was dark, gray, dull Soviet Union. And I think Ukraine has been coming out of that dullness in such an unbelievable fast way that, taking this into account, I'm optimistic.
Thank you for these words. I might add, just before this meeting, my son sent me a link to a new survey by Time Out. It's one of the leading touristic outlets in the world. And survey was about the coolest neighborhoods in the world, the top 20. And I was so happy to see on number 16 the neighborhood around Golden Gate in Kiev. That is one of the coolest neighborhoods worldwide. So this resonates with me very much. Thank you. Anka, as I understand you, я розумію, що ти маєш зараз вже...
As I understand, you need to leave now. So please, final remarks from you. Thank you very much for this invitation. I believe that these topics, they are so broad, so important. We could speak about it the whole day. Unfortunately, I have to leave now, but I believe that we will speak about this topic maybe in the future, and I am really waiting for such opportunities. Thank you. Now the word is given to Roman for final remarks. Thank you, Oleksandr. On the whole, I have an optimistic view on this situation. I believe that the threat that is growing, it will force us to wake up, to have more realistic view of the situation. Once again, I would like to repeat that, and my colleagues from German side may slightly disagree, but I believe that the biggest threat goes from Russia, and we should perceive this as the war of Russia against civilized world. And in the nearest future, we need to build the system of counteraction. It should be not only in political and information sphere. This should have a legal base. This should be embodied in the legislation of Europe at the national and international level. We should understand, in Ukraine we say that we need to counteract force with force, because we can speak a lot, but the force should counteract the force, and the good should be able to defend itself. If we do not feed our army, we would feed the army of our enemy. So, and you remember that these things came from Europe, and we understand these things in Ukraine. And I call on our European counterparts in Europe that in Europe people should understand that Russia poses a threat. We may speak about economic expansion of China, but we should clearly understand that Russia is the country where everything will be used against the civilized world. This is like barbarism that ruined the Roman Empire. And you cannot find even one example in history where words could stop the force. And economic reasons cannot be the basis for rejecting our values. And in the Council of Europe, in the European Commission, in the European Council, what we see there, as a minimum, they avoid answering questions, or they play into the hands of Russian expansion, economic, information expansion, political expansion of Russia. And once again, I would like to stress this idea. Please, I want you to provide proper understanding. Ukraine passed the test. It was difficult, and the way of Ukraine is difficult, but we are capable, we are able to make the choice. And please, dear colleagues in the West, this force, this ability, we should bring this ability through Ukraine to Europe. I'm not speaking about the leaders of the European policy. I'm speaking about citizens, common citizens of Europe. They should understand these issues as well. And we cannot replace values with well-being, because if we replace this during this generation, our children will cry later. We should understand these things, and we should stop aggressive policy of Crimea, and we should not try to find excuses. This is our task, this is our obligation, the obligation of our generation, to stop these aggressive actions. Now the word is given to Leonid. Final remarks from Leonid. And this is a responsible mission, but you will provide final remarks, actually. Okay, I would like to support Roman, and starting 2014, it seems that Europe and Germany, because we are today speaking about Germany, they have less Putin supporters. They understand situation better from other perspective, thank God. And many people know that Putin is a killer, and this is a common knowledge now. And we should not convince people in this further, but we do not know what to do with all of this. And these are unpleasant things. There are such feelings. If we are speaking about the future, what we will have in 4 years, I hope that the West will find the answer what to do with this killer who heads big, powerful country that has big leverage of influence in Europe and in the world, and unfortunately in Ukraine as well. And I do not want that Ukraine during these 4 years would be in the status of the country where it is good to eat, whereas we have nice food. But our guys, they go to the front line, to the trenches, they are burnt by the sun. And I do not want to see this role of Ukraine in Europe. Of course, we will do some things. Of course, our guys will serve in the trenches, and girls as well. Yeah. Sorry. Of course, I should mention the girls who fight. Food is great here, yeah, and drinks are great here. But I would like that the part of those agreements, maybe oral agreements between Mr. Biden and Ms. Merkel concerning support for Ukraine, 1 billion fund, for example, that should help Ukraine to make this green transition, that this area, it should be developed in the great way to fill Ukrainian and Western policy with all the senses. We would like to make a breakthrough from this archaic state, because they consider us as in previous ancient times that Ukrainians are agricultural workers and warriors. But we would like to make a breakthrough from this past, like we were in the Soviet era. We would like to become modern state. And Mr. Biden is he's trying to make this green transition to help this transition in Europe. And this gas crisis, it shows that something should be done with the situation, and we should be the part of the West. We should be a part of Western civilization, and we are lacking this civilization here, we may say so, as the citizens of this wonderful country that was kissed by God. And we really were provided a lot. We are richer than many countries that are the members of the European Union, and but we cannot use it to our benefit, actually. And in 4 years, I would like to say that all that we wanted worked. So I would like to remind about meeting with German ambassador in 2010, and we spoke about the future of Ukraine, what will happen in 2020, and answers were provided. And now I believe that now it is even strange to think about those expectations that we had before, because the situation is really different now. I would like to say that Ukraine is together with Russia in its sins, but it is with Europe in its dreams. And we would like that Ukraine be the part of Europe. We would like to go along this way and join European Union. So I believe that you liked our discussion, because we enjoyed it greatly. We thank the organizers of this meeting, and we thank your Atlantic Choice Center and your Atlantic Course Center.